In the closing hours of Motul Petit Le Mans, Philippe Albuquerque and Pipo Derani made contact, and Imsa officials deemed this to be a racing incident. The incident took Philippe Albuquerque out of the race and pretty much decided the GTP championship. This and more from a wild 2023 Petit Le Mans. This year's Motul Petit Le Mans was definitely not short on chaos and carnage. But before the carnage of the race would take place, there was a pretty interesting qualifying session on Saturday. You see, it was interesting because of the weather. There was rain in the area that plagued much of the running on Friday. Qualifying for the GTD classes would start out damp but drying, and it would see a last-minute effort by the number 27 Heart of Racing Aston Martin, who decided to go out late in the session on slick tires that took the pole position. In addition to getting the GTD pole, they also set the fastest lap of all of the GT runners. Half a tenth behind them and on pole in the GTD Pro class would be the number 14 Vassar Sullivan Lexus, who only needed to start this race in order to lock up the championship. Now, as we progress to the LMP3 and LMP2 qualifying session, conditions would improve once again. We saw a great battle here as well. In LMP2, we saw Stephen Thomas and Ben Keating. They were going blow for blow into the very final laps of this qualifying session, with ultimately Ben Keating coming out on top in the number 52 PR1 Matheson Motorsports entry to take the final LMP2 pole position of the season. Meanwhile, in LMP3, it was the number 36 Andretti Autosport Ligier, driven by Glenn Van Berlo, that would take the pole position there. However, these improving conditions would not last, as for the GTP qualifying session, which was last to go out, the rain would start to pick up once again. When it was all said and done, it would be the number 10 Wayne Taylor Racing Acura, driven by Luis Delatraz, that would set a 1:15.4 second time, but they were actually the 6th fastest car of all of the cars that took to the track. You see, they were behind 5 LMP2 times. However, this all really doesn't mean anything, as for the prototype classes, Imsa does a class split after qualifying is complete, so it would still be the GTP class cars that would lead us to green on Saturday. Now, I've been looking into some different ways that I could improve these race recaps for you, and we're going to try something a little bit different. If you like it or you don't like it, let me know down in the comments below. But we're going to talk about 3 key moments from this race. The first key moment came pretty early on in the race here, and this had huge championship implications for one of our GTP competitors. The number 6 Porsche Penske 963 was involved in an accident in the opening hours of this race, and really by no fault of their own. This came after the high-class racing number 20 LMP2 turned into the Triarci Competizione Ferrari, collected the Inception Racing McLaren, as well as the number 6 Porsche. It was a pretty heavy impact for the McLaren as well as the Porsche. Both of them would not go any further in this race, and really for the number 6, this was their championship over for them. Now, we had talked about before the race even began how what the 6 had to do. They were right in the hunt for this championship, and it was really unfortunate to see them taken out so early in this race, and also by such really an avoidable incident. But I suppose with big full grids like we saw in this race, there's gonna be some traffic-induced incidents where you see here there's 3 or 4 different classes that are being caught up in this one, and just an overall an unfortunate situation all around. Thankfully, all the drivers were okay, and we were able to see the number 20 continue. They got a penalty for causing this wreck, and the number 023 Triarci Competizione Ferrari, they were able to come in. They didn't take too much damage. They got it repaired and back out there, and they were actually competitive right up until pretty much the end of this race. Key moment number 2, and this kind of for me defined the middle stages of this race, and that was the number 25 BMW rear-ending the number 31 Cadillac after both of them ran the red light at pit road exit during a full full course yellow. Now this occurred still relatively early on in the race. There was still plenty of time for them to recover from this, but it is a hefty penalty if you run the red light at pit road exit. Both cars had to return down pit road, and actually the BMW also got an incident responsibility penalty for this one and required them to come and do a drive-through penalty, an additional drive-through penalty after. The result of this was both cars found themselves one lap down. However, as this race would go on, there were plenty of incidents in full course yellows that would allow them to cycle back into contention and be back on the lead lap. However, it would not be until the closing hours of this race where we found the biggest key moment of all key moments in this one, and it's one that we're going to be talking about for a long time. It was heading into turn 1 between championship contenders, the number 10 and the number 31. They had been running nose to tail for so much of the second half of this race, and it all came to a head with a turn 1 incident. After trying to navigate around a slower class GTD car, Pipo Derani found himself on the inside defending a great run from Felipe Albuquerque heading into turn 1. Ultimately, Albuquerque was run a bit wide, catches his tires off in the dirt, and goes hard into the barrier. Albuquerque was actually taken to a local hospital. He was treated and released though, but it was a huge impact and one that ended the race for Wayne Taylor Racing. Now, taking a look at this incident, it can be easy to immediately put blame on Pipo Derani here. It definitely does look like the 31 tried to squeeze the 10 on the exit of turn 1. And to be frank, I think any driver in this situation would be trying to squeeze their opponent to the outside, going through a turn that you're not seeing a whole ton of passing take place at. Did he intentionally mean to run him off the road and send him into the barriers at one of the arguably the most dangerous corners of this track? I don't buy that at all. Look, there's a difference between being an aggressive defender and just outright dirty. These drivers still have a tremendous amount of respect for one another on track, and they're not looking to go out there, intentionally run each other off the road, and potentially put themselves in a very dangerous situation. However, it takes two drivers to get into an incident here, and you can look at this from the Albuquerque being over-aggressive perspective. At this point in the race, Albuquerque was clearly faster than the 31 in my opinion. Practicing a little bit more patience here and trying to make the pass attempt at a safer spot on the track, or one that you're gonna make that pass successfully a higher percentage of the time, may have been the wiser play. However, if we want to reference Pipo Derani's pass as being a potentially over-aggressive defender or an over-aggressive driver, then I think it's only fair that we do the same to Albuquerque. Let's throw it back to Sebring and the infamous incident in the closing hour where he got together with the Porsche. They got tangled up. They ultimately took out both of the Porsches en route to the 31, just squeezing through and going on to win. Now, it's not fair to say that Albuquerque's move there was all his fault. In fact, I believe that I called that a racing incident where both of the drivers involved in the incident should take equal responsibility. But it was still a very aggressive move by Albuquerque in that moment that ultimately helped cause that crash. In this instance, going around the outside into turn 1, which is not a traditional passing opportunity here at Road Atlanta. You can just ask the Chip Ganassi Racing drivers how this ended up for them last year, but that was a bit of an over-aggressive move. Derani could have left him more room, yes. Albuquerque could have been more patient, or heck, even backed out of the move when it didn't look like it was gonna work out. But regardless, I do think that both drivers played a significant part in this incident. Unfortunately, Albuquerque came out on the much worse end of this, and at the end of the day, Imsa officials agreed. They deemed it a racing incident, there was no further action needed, and the 31 did not get a penalty. I would ask for your opinions, but I already know you're going to be lighting up the comments, just keep it civil. Now, when it was all said and done, it would be the number 60 Meyer Shank Racing Acura driven by Tom Blomqvist, Colin Braun, and Helio Castroneves that would pick up the final win in the GTP class for the 2023 season. And who knows, this could be the last win that we see from Meyershank Racing in Imsa for a little while. A great way for them to go out. Technically, they're picking up their 3rd victory of the season, and it was really pretty neat. They had a bunch of fans that signed that car over the course of the weekend. Really cool to see that car go to victory lane. They beat out the 01 Cadillac Racing entry, and the number 59 Proton Racing Porsche rounded out the podium. In LMP2 was the number 04 CrowdStrike Racing entry driven by George Kurtz, Ben Hanley, and Nolan Segal that took the win in LMP2. They beat out the number 35 TDS Racing and the number 52 PR1 Matheson Motorsports entries. In LMP3 it was the number 30 JR3 Racing entry of Dakota Dickerson, Bjoy Garg, and Garrett Grist who picked up the win there. They beat out the number 13 AWA Duquesne and the number 74 Riley Motorsports Ligier. In GTD Pro was the number 79 WeatherTech Racing Mercedes driven by Denny Ukadea, Jules Gugnon, and Mauro Engel who took the win there. They beat out the number 9 FAF Motorsports Porsche and the number 62 Risi Competizione Ferrari. And in GTD, the number 78 Forte Racing powered by USRT Lamborghini finally got a win this year. They've showed some great pace over the course of this season for Misha Goiberg, Laura Spinelli, and Patrick Liddy. They beat out the number 96 Turner Motorsports BMW and the number 77 Wright Motorsports Porsche, who joined them on the podium. Overall, I thought this was a pretty darn messy race. I mean, cars were wrecking before they even took the green flag. There was an LMP3 and I think an LMP2. If they didn't go off right before the race, it was just after the green flag dropped. It was kind of insanity in the opening couple of minutes. Well, not just the opening couple of minutes. I mean, when you have 13 full course yellows over the course of a 10-hour race and the longest green flag period is an hour and 12 minutes, yeah, it was a pretty messy race. And as a part of that pretty messy race, we saw some pretty strange incidents as well. The number 14 Vassar Sullivan Lexus, they went off at turn 3 and they ripped the front end of the car off. It looked like it was on an advertising sign. I don't really buy that though. Those trackside advertising signs, they're only held in place by a couple of sandbags or bags of like potting soil that you just buy for cheap at Home Depot. But I think what actually happened was the rain over the previous couple of days had saturated the soil, and when the Lexus kind of went over a curb there on corner exit, it kind of kicked the rear end of the car up into the air and the splitter dug into the dirt. That's what I think happened. That's the only way that I can really think that it would cause that much damage. Although it would be interesting if we ever heard any confirmation of that, or if we actually saw any trackside footage. There hasn't been any great footage of the incident that has come out since. But despite some of these odd, strange incidents and some of these incidents that would go on to take out championship contenders, we also did see some really great racing. We saw the number 10 and the number 31 have some really good battles throughout this race. We also saw some more great battles take place in LMP2 and the GTD classes. And while you hate to see the race end under full course yellow for yet another strange incident where a Porsche goes up in flames, I still think that this was a pretty darn good race when it's all said and done. What did you think of the race though? Let me know down in the comments. Look, it can be difficult to stay on top of all the news in the world of Imsa. That's why I'm working on yet another way for you to stay in the loop. The S's is a weekly newsletter curated by me that brings all the biggest news stories from the past week and helpful analysis that you need to know. I bring together the best articles from the past week, videos or podcasts that I think you need to check out, and I put that all together with some helpful analysis and an easy 5-minute read. You can subscribe to the S's by clicking the link in the show notes or by heading to offinthes's.com. The season is over, so it's time to crown our champions. In the GTP class, it was the number 31 Whelen Engineering Cadillac that took the GTP class win with a 2,733 points. They ended up being 21 points ahead of the Wayne Taylor Racing Acura. The number 60 Meyershank Racing did just about all they could to claw their way back into this. They were 22 points back of the 31 when it was all said and done. But really, you can see from the top 5 in points here that it was a very close battle right down to the very end. And I think this first year of GTP action is really giving us a taste of things to come in the future. So much close racing, and anybody could take the win. In LMP2, it was a great championship battle right down to the wire, but it was the number 52 PR1 Matheson Motorsports entry that took the win by 37 points over the 04 CrowdStrike Racing entry. While in LMP3, this one was virtually decided before it got underway, but it is the number 74 Riley Motorsports Ligier that takes the win there. Riley Motorsports putting on an absolute masterclass in LMP3 these past few years, taking all of the championships. Big kudos to them. In GTD Pro, it's number 14 Vassar Sullivan Lexus who took the championship by virtue of starting this race. There was a good battle though for the second, third, and fourth positions though. Ultimately, the WeatherTech Racing Mercedes took second, with Corvette Racing edging out Pfaff Motorsports by just a single point for third place in the championship there. And in GTD, this one was decided back in Indianapolis, where the Paul Miller Racing BMW would take the win, but some good battles still going on in this one. You can see there, third through fifth, separated by just 6 points in the final tally. Again, representative of some of the really close battles that we saw in GTD over the season, although maybe not so much at the very top, with Paul Miller Racing running away with it. However, these championships weren't the only ones on the line, as the Michelin Endurance Cup was also decided. There, it was the number 31 Action Express Racing Cadillac that took the win in GTP. The 04 CrowdStrike Racing entry took the championship in LMP2. Can you guess who won it in LMP3, the Michelin Endurance Cup? Yeah, it was the number 74 who also took that championship. In GTD Pro, the number 79 WeatherTech Racing Mercedes took the Michelin Endurance Cup. And in GTD, it was the number 32 Preston Korthoff Motorsports Mercedes that took the win there. Finally, the Jim Truman Award in LMP2 for the top bronze driver at the end of the season went to George Kurtz. What does that mean, you ask? Well, he gets an automatic invitation to the 24 Hours of Le Mans next year. And taking the Bob Aitken Bronze Cup for the top-rated bronze GTD driver, it was Brandon Aribe, so he gets the automatic invitation to Le Mans next year. I also want to quickly touch on some Support Series championships that we saw decided this weekend. Jared Thomas took his second straight Mazda Itamitsu MX-5 Cup Series championship. A couple of very exciting races that went down this weekend. Congratulations to Jared, the first driver to win 2 championships in that series. In the Michelin Pilot Challenge TCR class, it was Robert Wickens and Harry Gottsacker that took the championship there. While in GS, it was the number 96 BMW of Robbie Foley and Vin Barletta that took the championship. Well, or did they? You see, the Michelin Pilot Challenge GS Championship is currently under appeal, as Rebel Rock Racing launched an appeal at the conclusion of the race. You see, it was a very, very, very tight battle between the number 96 and the number 71, to the point where it was 10 points between them, which is one position on track, that decided the championship. However, it boiled down to the number 27 Lone Star Racing Mercedes that pit on the last lap under full course yellow conditions with no obvious problems that they had, that gave the number 96 the position to take the championship. To add fuel to this fire, there were reports, and you could see it in some of the post-race broadcast shots, crew member from the number 27 camp giving an obscene gesture in the number 71 pits as they were digesting everything that had just happened. This is going to be an interesting story to keep an eye on here in the coming days and coming weeks here, as Imsa rules on this appeal. And as of the recording of this video, there hasn't been any response from either of the teams or Imsa with regards to this incident. In the VP Racing Sports Car Challenge, though, we do know who won those championships, as Bioy Garg took it in LMP3. There was a wild second race at the very end of race number 2. It's a pretty wild ending. Bioy actually ended up winning that race, but he pretty much already had the championship in hand at that point, regardless of the outcome. In GSX, it was the Turner Motorsports BMW driven by Francis Seldorf that took the championship there. far. Now, even though all of these championships have been decided, there's still plenty of off-season news to keep up to date on. Like this announcement from Corvette on who would be running the new Corvette in Imsa next year. A huge shout out to all the Patreon supporters. If you too want to support the show, then you can head to patreon.com/offintheesses. Once again though, thanks for tuning in. I hope everyone has a great race weekend and doesn't go off in the S's.